The new year has arrived, but did your heart feel it? While the world celebrates with fireworks and countdowns, Allah's calendar began in silence. No fanfare, no noise, just a divine whisper. Muharram has come, a month chosen by Allah, honored in the Quran, and yet, for many of us, it slips by unnoticed. This isn't just about a date, it's about a sacred rhythm we've forgotten, a month of deliverance and defiance, of Musa and Hussein, of history, pain, and purpose. What if the most important beginning of your year came and went, and your soul never looked up to see it? It came quietly, without the sound of fireworks or the announcement of the clock striking midnight. No parties, no confetti, no cheers in the streets. Muharram arrived the way sacred things always do, with dignity, stillness, and weight. It did not ask for attention. It already had it from the one who created time. But did we give it ours? The world we live in measures time with noise. Gregorian calendars mark the beginnings of fiscal years, school terms, and shopping seasons. December is lit up. January is loud. But when the month of Allah arrives, when sacred time begins, we are often too distracted to notice. We scroll past it, we work through it, we forget. And in forgetting, something inside us grows quiet too. A pulse we were meant to feel, a rhythm we were born to move with. We say we are Muslims, we believe in the Quran, we follow the Sunnah. But what does it say about our connection to the Prophet when we live by calendars he never followed? When our hearts beat in rhythm with the world, but remain out of sync with Allah's sacred design? This isn't about shame, it's about awareness. Muharram doesn't come to accuse us, it comes to awaken us. Because it is not just another month, it is a divine signal, a spiritual entryway into the year. It sets the tone. It calls the heart to align. And when we ignore it, when it becomes just another flipped page on the wall, we miss more than a date. We miss an opening. What does it mean to begin the year and not feel the beginning? What does it mean to start walking before you've decided your direction? Muharram was never meant to be ignored. It was meant to be honored, and not for Allah's sake, but for ours. The first month of the Islamic calendar was not chosen randomly. It was appointed, named, elevated. Allah called it His month. And when Allah gives something His name, it is no small matter. He sanctified it. He set it apart. And in doing so, He offered us a starting point, a reset, a reminder that every cycle begins with intention. But the tragedies that many of us have forgotten, the crescent of Muharram appears in the sky, and we do not look up. The gates of spiritual renewal open, and we walk by, not in defiance but in distraction, not with rebellion but with routine. The days of the world feel louder than the days of Allah. And the calendar of revelation begins without remembrance. When you live disconnected from sacred time, you live out of rhythm. Islam was never meant to be lived randomly. It is structured, intentional, rhythmic. 5 prayers mark the day. Ramadan divides the year. Sacred months shape our journey. And the first of those is Muharram. In this time, the believer is invited to begin again, not with resolutions, but with reverence. Not with noise, but with niyyah. The intention to return, to realign, to remember. But if we don't even notice the beginning, how can we take the first step? When the Prophet said that the year has 12 months and that 4 of them are sacred, he wasn't listing dates on a calendar. He was inviting us to live within the divine architecture of time. He taught us to treat these months with care, with restraint, reflection, and extra worship. Muharram was first among them, not just chronologically, but spiritually. And yet, for many of us, the sacred months have become foreign. We don't feel them pass. We don't mark their coming. We know more about secular holidays than divine seasons. We decorate for New Year's but forget Ashura. We plan vacations around summer breaks but don't fast on the 10th of Muharram. This forgetfulness isn't rebellion. It's erosion, spiritual erosion, the kind that comes not from denying the truth, but from no longer remembering it, the kind that makes sacred things feel ordinary, that turns divine days into blank pages on the calendar. The Prophet did not just believe in the sacredness of Muharram, he lived it. He fasted during it. He taught his companions to honor it. He called it Shahrullah, the month of Allah. It is the only month given that name. That alone should stir us, should cause us to pause, should bring us to attention. And what does it say then when we treat this month like any other? When we feel no shift, when we feel no need to return, recalibrate, or reflect? It says something about the condition of the heart, about its awareness, its attention. This isn't about declaring someone faithless for forgetting Muharram. It's about recognizing that we're losing our spiritual sensitivity, that something sacred is being drowned out by the noise of the world, that our compass is spinning and we haven't even noticed. Sacred time is not for Allah's benefit, it is for ours. He does not need reminders. We do. He does not need seasons to be merciful. We need seasons to return. And Muharram is one of those seasons, a divine opening, a fresh breath, a beginning that does not demand our attention, but deserves it. And beginnings matter, because how we begin determines how we move, and how we move shapes who we become. If we begin the year without presence, without purpose, without reverence, how can we expect to end it with barakah? This is the quiet power of Muharram. It doesn't arrive with a parade, it arrives with meaning, and only those who are listening will hear its call. Muharram isn't just a month, it's a question whispered into the soul. Are you living in sync with what Allah has sanctified? Time is not random. Allah created it with wisdom. He divided it with purpose. And He gave us markers, not just to organize life, but to navigate it spiritually. Muharram is one of those markers. And when we ignore it, we are not just ignoring a date. We are ignoring directions. The Islamic year begins not with festivity, but with sacred pause. Not with celebration, but with submission. Not with performance, but with presence. And this shift, from the loud to the quiet, from the outer to the inner, is what Muharram demands of us. It's easy to measure time by the world's clock, but the believer is meant to live by Allah's time, to feel the flow of sacred months, to hear the heartbeat of divine rhythm, and that rhythm begins with this month. How strange that we know the start of the Gregorian year, but not the Islamic one. That we light up for December, but remain asleep in Muharram. That we associate beginnings with noise, but ignore the sacred whisper of renewal. And yet, every year, Muharram returns, patient, quiet, faithful. It knocks gently at the door of the heart. Will you let it in? Will you wake up? Will you realign? Because it's not too late. It never is. As long as the crescent rises and the soul breathes, sacred time continues to flow. And Allah's mercy never stops calling. Muharram is a chance, a mercy, a moment, but it will not wait forever. When Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu made the pivotal decision to establish a calendar for the growing Islamic civilization, he had at his disposal many significant moments in the life of the Prophet Muhammad. He could have chosen the day of the Prophet's birth, a moment cherished and remembered throughout the Ummah. He could have chosen the day of the first revelation, when the light of the Quran first pierced through the darkness of ignorance. He could have selected the day of the victory in Makkah, the day the Quraysh finally bowed to truth. But he didn't choose any of these. Instead, he chose the Hijrah, the migration of the Prophet from Makkah to Medina, a journey not of celebration but of sacrifice, not of triumph but of trust. A moment where the believers left behind everything familiar, their homes, their wealth, even family, for the sake of Allah. That decision was not just logistical, it was deeply symbolic. It said something profound about the foundation of the Islamic worldview. The calendar would not begin with glory, but with surrender, not with comfort, but with commitment. And Muharram, being the first month of that calendar, inherits the spiritual DNA of that migration. It is not the celebration of what is easy, it is the opening of what is necessary. When you look closely at the Hijrah, you see that it was never simply a relocation. It was a line drawn in the sand between stagnation and movement, between fear and courage, between being Muslim in name and being Muslim in action. The Prophet and his companions didn't migrate for better economic opportunities or more comfortable homes. They migrated because their faith demanded it, because remaining in Makkah meant compromising the deen, and leaving meant preserving it. And so they left, some secretly, some by night, some after enduring years of persecution, all with hearts anchored in Allah's promise. Muharram inherits that legacy. It is the month that asks, are you willing to migrate within yourself? Maybe you won't travel miles. Maybe you won't leave your city. But will you shift? Will you leave behind spiritual laziness, the comfort of habit, the illusion of permanence? Will you take the first step toward Allah, even if it means sacrifice, even if it means discomfort? This is what makes the start of the Islamic year so different from the Gregorian one. While one begins with parties and noise, the other begins with quiet resolve. The Hijrah is not about fireworks, it is about footsteps. And each year, when Muharram begins, we are asked to take our own. It is a deeply personal question. What am I leaving behind? What am I carrying forward? What comforts have I grown addicted to that are quietly suffocating my growth? What excuses have I wrapped myself in that are now preventing me from moving closer to Allah? For the companions, leaving Makkah was not easy. They left behind family members who did not believe, memories of childhood, the Kaaba itself. But they knew something greater awaited, not in the physical destination of Medina, but in the promise that Allah never wastes the efforts of those who strive for Him. Muharram reminds us that the path to Allah often begins with letting go, not always of people or places, but of pride, of heedlessness, of sin. And so, the new Islamic year begins not with celebration, but with migration. An internal hijrah, one that does not require a passport, but does demand intention. And as we step into this month, we are reminded the first step is always the hardest, but it is also the most powerful. Because once you move for the sake of Allah, He moves towards you even faster. As we walk deeper into the sacred month, our journey intersects with a day that holds in its folds two rivers of legacy. Ashura, the 10th day of Muharram, is not merely a date, it is a convergence of courage. It is a moment suspended in time where two stories unfold, separated by centuries but bound by faith. On one side of this day stands Musa, alayhi salam, with his people cornered between the sea and Pharaoh's wrath. The waves tower before them. The chariots thunder behind them. Doubt ripples through the hearts of the Israelites. They cry out, "We are overtaken." But Musa, serene and certain, replies, "No, my Lord is with me. He will guide me." In that moment, the impossible happens. The sea splits, the ground appears, and they walk to safety on a path carved by divine mercy. That story lives in Ashura. It echoes through every fast, every tear of gratitude, every heart that trembles with the realization that when you trust in Allah, no sea is too vast and no pharaoh too strong. Fasting on Ashura becomes more than abstaining from food. It becomes a declaration. I too seek deliverance. I too trust in the unseen. I too am walking toward Allah through the uncertainties of life. But Ashura does not end there. On the other side of time, on the scorched plains of Kabbalah, stands another figure, Husayn ibn Ali, radiallahu anhu, the beloved grandson of the Prophet. He is not standing before a sea, but in the middle of a desert. He is not being chased, but surrounded. The army that encircles him is not Pharaoh's, but they are no less tyrannical. They outnumber him, outweapon him, and deny him and his family even water. He stands not to escape, but to make a stand, not to seek refuge, but to defend truth. Hussein could have chosen ease. He could have made a deal. He could have lived. But to live under falsehood is a kind of death. And so he chose the harder path, the one that leads not to safety, but to sacrifice. As one by one his companions fell, as his sons and brothers were slain, as even his infant child was struck, he did not waver. He held on. He prayed. He remembered Allah. And when he finally fell, it was not as a man defeated, but as a soul delivered. Ashura holds both stories. One of miraculous escapes, one of tragic martyrdom. One where Allah's help came by parting a sea. One where Allah's love showed through the firmness of a stand. Both are victories, both are honored. This is the richness of Ashura. It reminds us that divine help comes in different forms. Sometimes Allah saves you from the enemy. Sometimes He strengthens you to stand before them. Sometimes He parts the sea. Sometimes He plants your feet firmly in the sand. Fasting on Ashura is not just about following the Sunnah. It is about remembering these rivers of faith. It is about tasting the legacy of those who walked before us, those who trusted Allah even when the odds were overwhelming. It is about becoming part of that story, even for a day. And yet, this day that unites legacies has also become a day misunderstood. Some claim it belongs to only one group. Remembering Hussein is a sectarian act. That honoring Ashura leans toward division. But the fast of Ashura was practiced by the Prophet himself. It is rooted in his guidance. And remembering Karbala is not innovation, it is inheritance. To honor this day is not to mourn endlessly, nor to perform theatrics. It is to reflect, to ask, when have I stood like Hussein? When have I trusted Musa? When have I fasted, not just with my stomach, but with my ego? When have I remembered that standing for truth sometimes means standing alone? Ashura becomes the lens through which we examine our own lives. Are we walking toward freedom, or are we becoming comfortable in slavery? Are we speaking up when falsehood reigns, or are we choosing silence for the sake of ease? Are we seeking Allah's help, or are we relying on our own strength? And beyond the 10th of Muharram lies something even more subtle, the realization that the entire month holds weight, that every day of this month is touched with sacredness, that Allah, who named this month as His own, watches every act of restraint, every prayer whispered, every intention to return. And the one who responds, even with a single fast, even with a single tear, joins the ranks of those who honored what Allah honored. Because in the stillness of Muharram, something extraordinary happens. We are pulled out of the chaos. We are reminded of the divine rhythm, and we begin to feel again the heartbeat of faith, the urgency of the soul, the mercy of beginning anew. That is what Muharram offers. That is what Ashura whispers. And that is the path walked by Musa and Hussein alike, not for survival alone, but for submission, for sincerity, for truth. And now it's our turn, in the quiet hours of Muharram, when the rest of the world goes about its ordinary days, something stirs in the heart of a believer who is still attuned to the unseen. This stirring isn't loud. It doesn't make headlines. It doesn't trend. But it is profound. It is the silent awareness that this time, is not like any other. That in this month, what seems small is magnified, what seems ordinary is honored, and what seems forgotten is seen by Allah Himself. Every fast, every withheld word, every restrained gaze, every conscious act of humility carries multiplied weight in Muharram. Not because we are perfect, but because this month is. It is pure in its beginning, sacred in its origin, and full of opportunity for those willing to step into it with sincerity. There is something subtle yet powerful about sacred time. It doesn't overwhelm with commands. It beckons with possibility. It's not about how much you do, but how aware you are of what you're doing and for whom. A believer who wakes in the darkness of night during these days and lifts their hands in prayer is not simply performing an act. They are answering a divine call. A call that echoes from the Hijra, that flows through the Red Sea with Musa, that bleeds from the sands of Karbala with Hussein. In Muharram, those prayers are not isolated. They are woven into the legacy of those who stood firm, trusted, and sacrificed. And that's what makes this month different. It isn't passive. It invites action, quiet, reflective, sincere action. The Prophet didn't only speak about the virtues of Muharram. He lived them. He fasted. He taught. He recentered the hearts of his companions around what Allah had made sacred. He did not wait for the world to honor the month. He led the world in recognizing its weight. So in our time, when calendars are filled with deadlines, when celebrations are governed by commercials, and when the sacred feels buried under the noise of modern life, Muharram becomes a quiet rebellion. To fast while others feast, to pray while others scroll, to remember while others forget. This is the believer's strength. This is what it means to live in rhythm with divine time. The danger, though, is subtle. It isn't that we reject Muharram, it's that we forget it. And spiritual forgetfulness is far more dangerous than open rebellion. Rebellion can be confronted. Forgetfulness spreads quietly, comfortably, until the sacred becomes irrelevant. Until we fast only in Ramadan, because that's what we remember. Until we recognize December's end more than Allah's beginning. Until sacred time becomes a cultural afterthought. And this is where the erosion begins, not because we became bad people overnight, but because we stopped paying attention. We stopped feeling the shift in the spiritual season. The Baraka began to feel like routine. The weight of divine timing began to feel optional. And that's when we risk losing not just practices, but perception. We risk losing the ability to feel sacredness, to recognize the days that Allah elevated, to respond to the call that He continues to send. That call is still there every year. The moon rises again, the days turn, and Muharram returns, not to shame, but to remind, not to accuse, but to offer. Every sacred moment is a door. Every sacred month, a window into mercy. And when Allah names a time as His, it's not for display, it's for us to step through. But this cannot remain personal. The rhythm of sacred time is not just for individual benefit. It is communal. It is generational. Because what one generation forgets, the next may never know. And that is perhaps the most urgent truth about sacred time. It must be protected not just in the heart, but in the home. When parents stop fasting on Ashura, children grow up thinking it is irrelevant. When we don't gather our families to speak about Musa or Hussein, their stories become folklore instead of fuel. When we fail to greet sacred time like an honored guest, our children won't even recognize its arrival. The loss isn't just ours, it becomes a loss for the Ummah. We will raise generations who know every global holiday but cannot name the 4 sacred months. Who prepares for Black Friday but not for Muharram? Who celebrate the world's milestones but not Allah's beginnings? And so the revival must begin with us, not with grand displays, not with complex ceremonies, but with simple acts of remembrance. A fast shared with family, a story told at dinner, a prayer said aloud, a moon watched together. These moments matter. These moments plant seeds. And those seeds grow into legacy. Because where we live, they will learn. What we prioritize, they will remember. What we honor, they will revere. Muharram is not just a month, it is a teaching, a curriculum of faith delivered by Allah, taught by the Prophet, and meant to be passed on generation by generation. If we don't teach it, the world will replace it. And that is where the rhythm of sacred time is either preserved or broken. In the small decisions, in the quiet nights, in the whispers of stories that we choose to pass down. Because the world is loud and the sacred is subtle. And if we don't intentionally hold on to the latter, it will be drowned by the former. But when we do hold on, when we live in sync with the divine calendar, we begin to see differently. Time stops feeling random. The months stop blurring. Life becomes structured not around worldly deadlines, but divine markers. And slowly, sacredness returns. We begin to feel the year differently, not starting in January, but in Muharram, not building momentum from gyms and goals, but from fasting and prayer, not measuring success by income or achievements, but by proximity to Allah. And it all begins by noticing the month, by remembering its meaning, by responding to its invitation. Because sacred time is not about perfection, it is about presence. Allah does not ask for extravagance. He asks for sincerity. He does not demand that you do everything. He wants you to begin something. And Muharram is the first chapter of that journey, a journey back to Him, a journey into legacy, a journey into the heart of the Ummah. The journey is open now, and the door is wide. The question is, will we walk through it? Will we notice the whisper? Will we teach it to those around us? Because the truth is, this month isn't waiting for us to be ready. It is already here. It has already been named by Allah. It has already been honored in the Quran. It has already been lived by the Prophet. Now it is up to us to answer, to remember, to return.